Assalamu alaikum. You're listening to the Niqabi Diaries series by The Pen, the sound of sisters raising their voices with the written word. I'm your host Samar, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of By The Pen. Alhamdulillah, we have with us Sister Sadia Nesar. Is that the correct pronunciation,
Yes.
sister?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. So alhamdulillah, sister, there's a lot of interesting things that I'd like to talk with you about, inshallah. So if you could first introduce yourself, obviously, and then we can start talking about your book and a few other things, inshallah.
Okay. I'm Sister Sadia. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I was also born with a physical disability called myopathy. So basically, all of my muscles are weak, and including my lung muscles. So I use the BiPAP whenever laying down, and I use the wheelchair when I go out. But it wasn't, disability was more invisible, and I was usually more sick, so I didn't really associate myself with having a disability until maybe during my teens. I knew that I always wanted to write from a young age, because when you have a physical disability, you can't really play easily when at the playground. So I naturally gravitated towards books, and I knew that I wanted to write books one day. And whenever I was sick, I would find a sanctuary when reading books. It would take me to another world, and I especially enjoyed reading on the stories of the prophets because it would comfort me. So that basically is my journey, and I studied English literature because I knew that one day, inshallah, I would hopefully write a book. So yes.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. Okay, so there's a book. How many books have you released so far? Because I've been looking at this book called Strength from Within. And I believe that's one of your new books that you've got coming out to be released soon, is it? Or you've just released it?
Strength from Within is based on my life with physical disabilities, on how to cope, grow, and endure during life's trials. But I released the first chapter and the preface. And I've been working on poetry, a poetry book as well, and a children's book, but that's not yet out.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So you've got, is it 3 books coming out then?
Yeah.
Okay, and have you written any other books previous to these books?
No.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, so inshallah we've got a few things to look forward to. So, could you tell us, you mentioned that the strength from within, you're writing that is based on your journey with disability. So I would assume that obviously that is your kind of inspiration behind the book. So kind of what was there any particular thing that triggered you to write a book about your journey, or is it something that you had in mind for a long time because you said that you'd always wanted to be a writer?
It's mostly on deriving strength from the stories of the prophets. So even though it is on my life, it's also on the lives of different prophets and finding inspiration from that. So it's not this book is not exactly a memoir, and it's not exactly a self-help book either. It's like a combination of analyzing the stories of the prophets, analyzing Quranic ayahs and hadith, and just tying it to my personal experiences and trying to learn from it and trying to grow from it.
MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. There was something that I read in the, you've got a little taster of your book. I think it's the first chapter that you've got on your website. So it's something that I really like that you wrote. And it says, change cannot occur if we do not firstly accept both the reality of life and the existence of trials. Denial makes us consumed with how to get out, but acceptance gives us the chance to discover the strength from within to sprout. It allows us to shift our focus towards endurance, growth, and making the best out of the situation. And I really, really like that, Span. I thought that was quite profound that you wrote that, because it's true. Like when you find yourself in difficult situations, this is one of the things that people have when it comes, everybody has this, like, it's a test of patience, obviously, but it's that kind of, like you mentioned, the acceptance itself to the situation that will help you to actually have that initial patience, especially that you need to be able to go through that trial. And, because it's accepting that it's part of our qadr, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us in that place and time, and, in that particular situation, that we have to go through certain things.
Yeah, because that's the reality of life. It will never be always easy. And also it's the reality of our nature, that so there's that struggle of trying to accept. And honestly, it doesn't really have to be related to disability. It can be related to other types of trials. Usually when you're going through it, your intrinsic nature is just to, get out of it. But it's really hard to learn from that situation that way. It's really hard to make solid decisions that way. So once you learn to accept, and once you learn to, as a potential blessing, you can hopefully and try to flourish from it.
Absolutely, subhanAllah. So who would you say your book is aimed towards?
My book is aimed towards basically anyone who wants to learn how to cope or grow. But since it's on the stories of the Prophet, Muslims would, find it helpful. But if I have to go a little bit more narrow, it would be for people with disabilities, and especially their parents. This book is actually dedicated towards parents of children with disabilities, or even adults with disabilities, just to show that it's possible for their children to grow and accept and endure and actually turn their experiences into something constructive and achieve something, instead of the stereotype that, oh, if you're born with a disability, your life is over. Because that's what we're told from society. That's what we're conditioned to believe as well. So if I have to be as narrow as possible, it would be for parents and people with disabilities. But I try to make it also general, so that anyone going through a trial can find hope and inspiration, and hopefully comfort, and also hopefully relate to the disability experience. You don't necessarily have to have a disability to connect with the disability experience. Yeah.
Absolutely, definitely, I agree. And it's the point that you mentioned there about for parents especially, that they shouldn't give up hope, thinking that their children can't have normal lives or productive lives because of disabilities. It's something interesting. My husband said he watched it recently, which he said he saw something on YouTube where there was actually a football team in China or something, and they were actually blind, all of them. And subhanAllah, they play football, and they're actually really good. And I was just thinking, like, how, like, even thinking about somebody who has blindness running in general, like how do they even run, let alone like be kicking a ball and passing it to each other and things like that, subhanAllah. So it shows that, like, the disability is something which is only as much as your mind allows you to believe that you have, so obviously there's going to be certain physical restrictions, but it's like you said, the disability, it might not be something even just physical. There's certain situations that people have, even people who might not have physical disabilities, but there's a disability in some area in their life where maybe they feel restricted, or there's certain things they don't have access to, which is stopping them from feeling that they can go forward. But when we have that acceptance, like you mentioned, then we learn to navigate through those different situations, inshallah. So subhanAllah, for me, like, it's something that I find really quite an in-depth topic, and definitely, like you said, I think definitely a lot of people can inshallah benefit from what you're trying to get across in your book. And I love that you've related it to the stories of the prophets as well, because I think that it's something important that we connect their stories with our lives today as well. So because often, like, we read their stories, and as Muslims and maybe feel somewhat distant from them, and maybe it's just something interesting to read from the past, or something to read to children to help them understand about Allah and these kind of things. But really, we're told the stories of the prophets for this particular reason, like you're doing, is giving this kind of deep reflection and contemplation on their lives, and looking at how they progressed through their different trials that they went through, subhanAllah.
Yeah, and it's also assumed for people with disabilities that it's not really important for them to learn Islamic history. It's not related to them, and they're not expected to go to the masjid. So I kind of hope to show that yes, Islam is related to us. Yes, learning about the stories of Prophet is relatable to us, and rather it's important, and rather we can make something out of it. We can grow from it. We can actually share from learning from their stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, while writing this book, what would you say have been, some of your biggest challenges?
My biggest challenge wasn't necessarily the writing process, but the realization of some of my experiences. Because since it was so personal, it required me to think and reflect, and also, just I was pushed to see like some of the experiences that I faced related to stigma, and was very much unnecessary. And it was kind of hard for me to accept that how society perceives disability, and also kind of pushed me to realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So even though I finished writing the book, I realized that this is just the beginning. I'm not done. There's so much work left. This is a heavy responsibility as well, on behalf of people with disabilities, because everyone has their own unique experience. So it was hard to just make sure that this topic is given justice, but also it's written carefully, especially the words we use when describing disability as well.
Absolutely, definitely, because obviously there's a lot of people, like, I suppose it depends where you live in the world. Like you mentioned, there's certain things that are assumed about disabilities, or people who have disabilities, and so people, depending on their background and where they live, there's certain terms which maybe that they use that are not really acceptable, or not really, how can I say, pleasant, basically, for somebody who's got a disability, to hear these kind of terms, and it must seem quite derogatory as well, actually. So can you share some of your experiences with that?
With the terms that people use, or
yes, just to shed some light, because obviously this is something that's quite alien to me. I mean, I think growing up, I've always tried to be conscious about these kind of things, and I've always had an interest, things that are different from anybody who's different from myself, or anything that's different from my experience. But so I like to hear from other people. So from your own words and your experiences, how has that, can you give us some examples of some experiences that you've had, basically, that and how it's affected you, or maybe motivated you in your journey?
When growing up, I would feel confused over the word special needs. Like, why the word special? I didn't feel special. I didn't like that attention differently. And I felt like the needs that we have is very much human needs instead of special needs. So I didn't feel comfortable with that terminology. And a lot of people with disabilities feel that way. Also, the word handicapped, it is very derogatory, because it goes back to the notion that hand and cap, like you're a beggar and you're asking for money, like that's the history of that word, and it has a very negative connotation to it. And also, just mostly also the tone, the way people say, the way people talk to you. I'm okay with the word disabled, even people with disabilities. But if you talk to someone and say, "Oh, you're just disabled," like the tone behind using the word says a lot as well. There are a lot of microaggressions. Yeah.
Yes, subhanallah. So you mentioned microaggressions there. Um, where do you think these kind of aggressions come from, basically, like an hostility maybe towards people with disability?
I'm not exactly sure where it comes from. Maybe it's because uh, they're not as exposed to people with disabilities, but I don't like to give that excuse or reason because I think every human being deserves to be treated with dignity and honor.
Exactly.
But also, I don't know, maybe that's the belief that, people with disabilities aren't meant to participate or show up. They should be at home. Or, oh, if they're there, it's a burden to have them there. So how to make them uncomfortable so they don't come in the first place.
SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah. Something that you mentioned in because you had this mashallah TED talk, so I was listening to that, and something that you mentioned that I want to pick up from there is how you have to think and prepare much more like in advance when it comes to, like, for example, traveling and things like that. And you obviously mentioned about because I think it was during the time of COVID that you had done the TED talk, so you kind of compared it to there where everybody now, because of the COVID, they have to think a lot more about preparing to travel and different precautions that they will be taking to make sure that their health is held like in paramount, basically. So can you talk about some of your experiences with that as well?
Well, COVID made it a lot easier to explain the disability experience. A lot easier. Because a lot had to isolate themselves and they were struggling to isolate themselves during COVID. But then it was easier to say that, and this is not new for people with disabilities. We have to isolate ourselves in general, especially if, like during winter seasons, if we have weak muscles and we catch the flu easily, we're in a position where we have to isolate ourselves. So it was a lot easier to have conversations on disability and make it relatable. And also, since everyone during the pandemic shifted their work online, it was a lot easier to say, why can't we make more work available online for people with disabilities, make it more accessible. I mean, it's more possible. Why wasn't it done before for people with disabilities? So the COVID and the pandemic actually helped, stir up conversation towards, inclusion.
Absolutely. SubhanAllah. And it's what, it's sad that it has to come to such a big event, like it was a worldwide event, COVID, so it's sad that it has to come to this point where people actually start thinking about people who have disabilities. And it's like we're a little bit behind, isn't it? We're supposed to be advanced in the world and technology and all these kind of things, but still when it comes to these basic things, we have levels of exclusion which it shouldn't be acceptable, really. And people are not aware or made to be aware of these things, because I think my mum, she has a problem with her hip, so when she's traveling, she has to usually use the like wheelchair access and things like that, because she can't walk for long distances. So when she said that, one of the things that they do is, like, if women and children, for example, or babies particularly, and anybody who has any kind of disability, they're supposed to be boarded on the plane usually first. And so she was talking about some of her experiences with different airlines, and how some of them are very accommodating, and how some of them they really actually make you feel like you're a burden sometimes, or they don't follow certain protocols. And in one of her experiences, she was actually boarded on the plane the last person, and she was quite upset about that. So she was made to wait for a longer period of time than what obviously that was the rules, basically. And she didn't understand why.
Yeah, it's really hard to know what to expect when you go out, because people may approach things differently. You know, it's kind of, I mean, there are more and more people that are accommodating compared to before. That's what I've noticed. There's more awareness, but there are some people that, you know, like, who don't really care, or who would kind of put you to the side and make you go last, as your mom experienced.
Yes, subhanAllah. So who would you say have been your biggest supporters while writing this book?
When writing this book, of course, um, I needed my family to help me sit down in the first place, so they've supported me to move down and do the work. And also, my editors, like Hind Hagazi and Niqabi Robert from Muslim Writers, they've been a huge support. I couldn't have done it without their guidance. And also, anyone that was kind to me in the past and who actually believed in me and encouraged me to write. My grandfather, even though he passed away a long time ago, I remembered his like encouragement, and that was a source of motivation for me as a writer and an author. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. That's beautiful that you mentioned about your grandfather as well, because it shows that the influence somebody can have on our lives, the lasting influence, you know, like long after their death, long after they've passed away, subhanAllah. So that's really beautiful as well, alhamdulillah. So what kind of advice, sister, would you give to other sisters, you know, Muslim women like yourself who also have disabilities, or, you know, who want to write, or maybe they don't have a disability, but they feel that they are not able to write, or they, you know, that writing is something that, you know, is for them, that they could be able to actually do. What advice would you give them?
Well, the first advice I would give them is, don't believe that you're not able to write. Just because someone discourages you on, you won't know until you try. And you won't know until you try acting multiple times. It may not come naturally at the beginning, but it will come eventually. And trust your gut, trust your experiences, and also learn from your experiences and believe that something good will come out of it. You are your story. What you've gone through is your story. And just, you know, by writing articles first. And eventually you can develop those articles into chapters. So if you have to break down your goals, then break it down a bit and just write, inshallah.
Yes, subhanAllah, that's a really good tip about the articles as well, because I think that helps people. It's just like a beginning point, isn't it? And I saw a post actually that was talking about that, where it said, you know, you can, if you have an idea for a book, you could start by writing even just 10 different headings. I think a sister that I interviewed, she mentioned that, and I also read it in an article. But yeah, sister that I've interviewed previously, she said, like, if you write 10 different kind of points that you want to mention, and then you take those into articles, and then after that, then you can break it down further, and then you get chapters from them. So yeah, subhanAllah, there's so many different methods like that can be followed, which you know, can be helpful for somebody who's getting started with their writing journey. So sister, where is your book going to be available, and when is it going to be released?
And hopefully inshallah will be available at Q Publishing, and it will be released early 2024, maybe before Ramadan. I don't know the exact date.
Inshallah.
And yeah.
Inshallah. And what about your poetry book that you said you was writing as well? Would that be before this one, or still to come after?
I honestly have no idea, because I'm still under talks with the publisher.
Okay.
And we might make some changes, like, because I originally just wrote poetry, but they want me to add some reflections as well.
Okay.
So I have no idea when. And it's like gamble. I actually don't know which book will come out first, the children's book, poetry book, or Strength from Within. I have no idea.
Okay. Khair inshallah.
Yeah.
Khair inshallah. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey with the publishers as well? How did you go about actually finding a publisher for your book?
Well, I had a lot of guidance from Muslim writers, like through Hind and Naima, and basically just I applied like the main Muslim publishers, like Q Publishing, um, International Islamic House, like Taha Publishers, and just write a cover letter and attach the manuscript. And I don't, oh yeah, I think the first few chapters, and then read in the manuscript. Sometimes you don't hear back straight away, so they usually get back maybe after a couple of months or after a while. So don't get discouraged if you don't hear back straight away, and just keep trying. And don't just aim for publishers in a specific country. Try publishers in different areas in the world, like even try Malaysian publishers or publishers in Singapore. And just try, just keep on trying, and kind of expect that you won't hear back for a while. And it takes time. I've learned on the hard way that it does take time. You have to be patient.
Absolutely. SubhanAllah. Alhamdulillah. So anyways, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Sister Mashallah, and I'm really looking forward to your book being released. And inshallah, what we'll do, because obviously you haven't released it yet or don't have any finalized dates, and when you do get word about when it is when it is finalized, we could have another interview perhaps, or let me know so I can inshallah share your book and links as well. We can still put that in the description at a later date, inshallah, so that people can, when they come across the interview and the book has been released, we can actually, people can get access to it, inshallah. And in the meantime, I think you do have a website, isn't it? So we can put the link to that so that people get a taster of the book as well.
Yeah, chapter 1 is available on my official website, and thank you for having me. And I look forward to talking to you once things are clear in terms of when the book comes out.
Inshallah, sister. Barakallahu feekum, and have a blessed day, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.